So, good morning, everyone. I want to talk this morning about the distinction between self-pity and self-compassion because often they get conflated, often they get confused, and they're very much not the same thing. And there's a particular kind of suffering, I think, that most of us have had some experience with, but we may not have named it. And it often sneaks up sort of quietly. Sometimes it's uh, dressed up as honest self-reflection. And it comes in the form of self-statements like, why does this always happen to me? I've worked so hard and things still don't change, still don't matter. No one really understands what I'm going through, on and on. And it's sort of like, I like to think of it as sort of a fog that just settles over us, this heavy gray, uncomfortable, but familiar form of suffering. But here's what I think happens when we're in that space, in that sort of self-pity space. We usually reach for one of two sets of tools. The first one is self-criticism. Why stop, feeling sorry for yourself, stop feeling so weak, get it together, pull yourself up, so forth and so on. And then the second response to self-pity is often suppression. Stuff it down, don't look at it, move on. Neither of these, I think, really works. Both leave the wound, the original thing that we're pitying about, unattended, and the suffering persists. And underneath both of these strategies is a confusion about what the real alternative is to self pity. It's neither of those. It's not it's not mental toughness. It's not positive thinking. It's not this sort of spiritual bypass of just be present with it, just show up. The real alternative, in my opinion, to self pity is self compassion. And and they are not similar, even though they may seem or sound similar. The Buddha's first teaching wasn't about meditation technique, wasn't about ethical precepts. It was this simple, undeniable acknowledgement of dukkha, of suffering, dissatisfaction, the pervasive sense that something is off, something is missing, that life contains pain, bodies get sick, relationships fracture, careers stall, people and other things we love die. This is not some sort of malfunction or the universe punishing us. This is just what the Buddha called the nature of conditioned existence. Stephen
Okay.
Batchelor, who I often reference early influence, he's sort of a leading thinker and writer in secular Buddhism. And he sort of rethought, reframed the Four Noble Truths into what he calls the four tasks. And the first task is to fully embrace life, or fully embrace suffering, fully embrace dukkha, sort of the same thing. Not to fix it immediately, not to explain it away, but just to let it land, just to be with it. Welcome it as the reality of being an alive human being, to let ourselves feel it, not do whatever we can to get away from it. And this is where both self pity and self compassion begin. They both start from this place of dukkha, of suffering. And they may sound very similar, but this is precisely where they diverge. Self pity takes that suffering and then it adds a story to it. Woe is
Mm,
me. Why is this happening? Poor
mhm.
me. On and on and on.
Very good
And
point.
so,
Does.
there we go. And so, not the story is not this. Oh, this hurts. I don't like it. It's uniquely, unfairly happening to me. That's usually the subtext or the primary text of the story. Woe is me. Poor me. It transforms in a not helpful way. It transforms this universal feature of human existence, which is dukkha, into some sort of personal persecution. I used to see this when I was working with folks. People personalize their suffering. They blame the universe, they blame God, they blamed whatever, and they personalized it. Okay. But from the teachings of the Buddha, this doing this is a manifestation of the three poisons: craving, aversion, and delusion. Okay. When we're caught in self pity, we are craving for reality to be different. We are angry that this thing, whatever the suffering is, has been visited on us. We are flooded with aversion toward that present experience. And we're operating also under the delusion that we're this fixed, firm, isolated self, someone to whom bad things are unfairly done from whatever the source. This is, and that is that awareness of the fixed self. I mean, that belief in the fixed self, is contrary to the Buddha's insight of anatta or non-self. The Buddha's teaching that is not that there's no experience, but there's no fixed, firm entity, person sitting there experiencing it. It is that the self is not a rigid, separate, permanent entity we take it to be. It's dynamic, it's flowing, as we talk about here often. It's ever changing. My favorite metaphor for this is it's more like the river than the rock, more like the rock. I'm sorry, more like the river than the rock. The rock is fixed, the river keeps flowing. Because when we cling to this fixed identity, the one who has been wronged or the one who always fails, we freeze that flow. We try to freeze the river flowing. Okay. We create a story around it that becomes its own prison, its own source of deeper suffering. Some of you may know the work of the psychologist, I think she's in Texas now, Kristin Neff. She's sort of considered one of the leading researchers and thinkers on self-compassion, has written and researched this extensively. I really like her work. She said she calls self-pity, she characterizes it as, quote, excessive rumination on misfortune, on a sense of victimhood, and on feelings of isolation. So her sort of academic definition here is excessive rumination on misfortune, a sense of victimhood, and feelings of isolation. And what that boils down to is our over-identification with our suffering. We take it on as who we are. We replay it. We amplify it. We make it to be the whole of who we are in that moment. And crucially, it generates a sense of being alone with our pain. We don't see that others do it. It's just about me, which only deepens my suffering. Okay. Baxter then goes on with his second task, which is to let go of reactivity, to release the craving, to release the aversion, to release the delusion that turn ordinary pain, unavoidable pain, into prolonged suffering. And self-pity is precisely the reactivity that he's talking about there. It is the amplifier. It is not the pain itself. It is the thing that amplifies the pain. Kristin Neff goes on to say, quote, self-compassion is simply the practice of turning compassion inward. Sounds easier than said than done. But it is, she goes on to say, and you hear this a lot, that giving ourselves the same kindness and support that we would give to a good friend who is suffering. Just think about how we respond to a close friend who calls us in distress. They're exhausted, they're grieving, they're ashamed of some mistake they made. We wouldn't say things like, well, you should have seen that coming, or why didn't you push harder? You wouldn't say, stop feeling sorry for yourself. We would probably sit with them with empathy, with compassion. We would acknowledge their pain. We would remind them that struggling is a part of being human. We all go through it. We'd offer care. We'd offer warmth. We'd offer concern. Self-compassion is simply, and not so simply, enacted the practice of extending that same response to ourselves. And as I said, easier said than done. Kristin Neff identifies three interlocking components to this practice of self-compassion. The first one is self-kindness. Self-kindness, treating ourselves with warmth and understanding, not with harsh judgment. We notice when we're starting the harsh judging stories, and we interrupt it, and we try to invoke some self-kindness. The second of her three interlocking components, common humanity, recognizing that suffering, failure, and inadequacy are not personal failures, but universal aspects of the human condition. Everybody goes through suffering, failure, and inadequacy. and it's not a failure. It just is what happens. And then the third, unsurprisingly, is mindfulness, holding painful thoughts and feelings in balanced awareness, what she calls balanced awareness. I love that term. Neither suppressing them nor drowning in them. Okay? We hold them with balanced awareness. And that second component, common humanity that I mentioned, that is the one that most directly, I think, dismantles self-pity. Self-pity insists I am alone in this suffering. Emphasizing common humanity in the self-compassion model is everyone struggles. This is part of being human. One of them isolates the self-pity, the other one connects because it points to the universality of our suffering, that everybody goes through it. We're all in the same boat. One narrows the world down to that particular wound. Oh, it hurts. Why me? Blah, blah, blah. It's the other places the wound in the vast shared landscape of human experience. It says everybody goes through this. At some point, someone will raise an objection whenever I talk about this, and I will concede it's a fair objection. They say, isn't this just a more sophisticated form of self-pity? Isn't this being kind to yourself notion just an excuse to wallow in it? Okay. But again, I would take issue with that understanding. Paul Gilbert's another psychologist, and he wrote and founded a whole school of therapy called compassion focused therapy. And he takes this question on directly when I was reviewing his work. I hadn't looked at it in a long time. But he is emphatic. Compassion is not passive. It's not indulgent. It's not spiritual comfort food. Compassion, as Gilbert defines it, is, quote, an active motivation to alleviate suffering in oneself and in others. The operative word there is active. There's a certain passivity about self-pity, but not with compassion. The Dalai Lama, who Gilbert cites throughout his work, puts it plainly. He says, quote, compassion is not helpless pity in it, but an awareness and determination that demands action. It is active. Self-pity is static. It just sits there and festers. It circles. It loops. It narrows. It says, I can't. It's too much. No one understands my suffering. Poor me. Woe is me. That is not self-compassion. Self-compassion is dynamic. It acknowledges the pain fully, honestly, and then asks, what do I need now? What does this moment need? What would genuinely help right now? And this takes us right into Batchelor's third and fourth tasks. The third task is directly experience the cessation of reactivity. Oh, look, I didn't go to the story. I didn't go to the wallowing in self-pity. That moment of spacious clarity that comes with his third step is when we are no longer feeding the fire of self-pity, but simply being present with what's there, the suffering that's there. And then his fourth path is what he calls actualize the path. His fourth task, rather, is what he calls actualizing the path, to live moment by moment with mindfulness, wisdom, and ethical care. Self-compassion is not a destination. It is the path itself, walked step by step. In Buddhism, the Buddha talked about, in terms of the more nuanced aspects of some of his teaching, he talked about the near enemies of the Brahma Viharas, the near enemies of the so-called heavenly abodes, the four, which are loving kindness, metta, compassion, karuna, appreciative joy, and equanimity. The near enemy of compassion, meaning it looks like it, but it's not it, is pity. Because pity can sometimes, when we pity someone, it may look like compassion from the outside. Oh, it's how terrible, you poor thing. That's awful what you're having to go through. The problem with pity is it maintains interpersonal distance. It looks down on the sufferer from a place of separation. I'm not suffering, you're suffering. Oh, poor you. I'm so sorry. That's terrible, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't say, I have been there too. Pity doesn't say that. But it does say how unfortunate it is this is happening to you. I've been there, or at some point I'll be there, or I've been in a similar place. True compassion is rooted in shared vulnerability, and it meets suffering on equal ground, on level ground. It says, yes, I know this pain. Yes, we're all in this together. There's no looking down. There's no separation. There's no, oh, poor you. It's like, hey, I get it. Been there. I hate it too. It's not fun. Pema Chodron, whose teachings on this I think are some of the most insightful I've certainly encountered, puts it this way. She said, in order to have compassion for others, we have to start with compassion for ourselves. That's where it originates. And she doesn't say that to sort of reinforce our self-importance or because we're the most important person in the room, but because self-pity and self-compassion are both opportunities, teaching opportunities, learning opportunities, training grounds. If we cannot hold our own suffering with greater kindness, it's going to be really hard not to shift into pity when someone else is suffering. It's going to be really hard to genuinely hold someone else's suffering with true compassion. If we can really turn toward our own pain with some warmth, with some acceptance, with steady presence, we find that the distance between our own suffering and everyone else's starts to just melt away. It becomes this kind of common shared experience, which can be so powerful in creating connection. So when we're stuck in self-pity, and we all go there, when we're ruminating, when we're isolating, when we're hardening into victimhood, let me suggest a three-step process, okay? A three-step pause, if you will. The first, acknowledge. This is when we notice and acknowledge. This is a moment of suffering. We say it plainly, without drama, without stories. We just say, oh, I'm suffering now. I just noticed I'm suffering. Step one. Step two is, oh, suffering is part of life. We remind ourselves, I'm not alone in this. And we stay with that for a moment to let it land. I mean, really land at a gut level. And then the third step in the very quick sequence is, may I be kind to myself in this moment. May I be kind to myself in this moment. That is really Neff's three components I talked about a few minutes ago, distilled into about 30 or 45 seconds. Oh, yes, I'm suffering. Number one. Number two, suffering is part of life. I'm not alone with this. Number three, may I be kind to myself in this moment. It's not that hard. We just have to remember to do it. And initially, it may sound like just words, but if we practice it continually, it really starts to get some traction. So Stephen Batchelor, in the book about the four tasks, says, quote, a compassionate heart still feels anger, greed, jealousy, and other such emotions, but it accepts them for what they are with equanimity and cultivates the strength of mind to let them arise and pass away without identifying with them or acting upon them. So he's saying even when we're in a compassionate space, of course we're going to experience the three poisons. Of course we're going to experience our own suffering. But we accept them, we recognize them, but we just let them, as all impermanent phenomena do, just arise and pass away. We don't lock into them. We don't start telling stories about it. We just watch them. Because self-compassion doesn't ask us to be free of difficult experiences. That's an impossible task. That's never going to happen. It doesn't ask us to be serene and enlightened and uncomplicated and above all of this. That's not going to happen. It simply asks us to stop abandoning ourselves in the moments when life is hard. Stop abandoning ourselves when the moment is hard, when life is hard. Because if you think about it, self-abandonment, I'm sorry, self-pity is at its root a kind of self-abandonment. I mean, it may dress up as self-preoccupation, but it's really kind of throwing ourselves under the bus. It's really kind of selling ourselves out. Where's the kindness in that? Where's the empathy in that? It says me, I constantly, but it doesn't really nurture that me or that I. It tells stories about that self. It judges that self. It feels sorry for that self, but it doesn't meet it with kindness, not with the warmth, the steadiness, and the clear-eyed acknowledgement that genuine compassion requires of us. That meeting of genuine compassion turned inward is this practice of self-compassion. Not once, not just while we're on retreat, not just while we're sitting in meditation, but in ordinary moments when we, excuse me, do something about which we're very self-critical, very self-judging, very harshly responsive to ourselves. Or when that email doesn't come, when the relationship is strained, when we look in the mirror and find ourselves falling short of whatever standards we've set for ourselves. Because the risk in those moments is we reach for that familiar place of self-pity. It just is it's that old Velcro thing of Velcro for the negative and Teflon for the positive. It's just the default self-pity. But we can choose in that moment to do something quite radical. We say, this hurts, I don't like it, but I'm here with it, and most importantly, I am not alone. I know this happens in some form to everyone. And doing so is not a weakness. It's not indulgence. It is, as I've said several times today, the practice of compassion turned inward to ourselves. The active, courageous, living heart of compassion directed sort of boomerang fashion right back into our own heart. So that's some thoughts this morning about self-compassion versus self-pity. Let me stop.